I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the podcast where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I am joined by Mr. Dr. Joseph Rosado. He is an MD and is one of the world's most respected medical authorities on cannabis as plant-based medicine. He is an outspoken advocate and highly sought-after speaker and educator with global impact. He's lectured throughout the United States, as well as speaking in Canada, Mexico, Malaysia, Fiji, Thailand, and a host of other countries. He has also appeared on many national and local media outlets, including ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News, Telemundo, Univision, Rolling Stone, and the New York Times, just to name a few. And Dr. Rosado has written multiple articles for medical journals, as well as 7 books, including his best-selling book, Hope and Healing: The Case for Cannabis. And with over 4 decades of experience as a healthcare professional, he has built a career anchored in family, driven to help his patients and community, as well as given the sometimes controversial aspects of integrative medicine as complementary modalities are proven effective. Dr. Rosado says, my goal is, and always will be to educate the public and allow them to make their own decisions. I would like to give a huge welcome to Dr. Joseph Rosado. Thank you so much for joining us, and I cannot wait to talk about cannabis and weed. I know some of my friends would like that.
Well, thank you for that excellent introduction. I appreciate that, Noah.
So the introduction kind of told a lot about yourself, but feel free to kind of go into further detail and just explain a little bit more about what you do when it comes to cannabis and medicine.
Sure. So, I am, as you stated, a certifying medical cannabis physician in the state of Florida, as well as in the state of Michigan. In Michigan, I primarily see children because the market up there has gotten so ridiculous, and the medical cannabis dispensaries and the adult use dispensaries are practically giving away the cannabis. And so, unless you're a child, or a parent that needs their child to have a card, pretty much anybody can walk into an adult use dispensary and buy what they want, need, or etc. Florida, similar to Alabama, where you are located, is a medical cannabis program, meaning that anyone that wants a medical cannabis card to be able to purchase medical cannabis must see a medical cannabis physician, and that's where I come into play. The state of Florida has some rules and regulations regarding what is allowed, what is not allowed, as far as medical cannabis and qualifying conditions. So the state of Florida has stated that there are certain conditions that automatically qualify someone for medical cannabis, and they are cancer, any type of cancer, epilepsy or seizures, glaucoma, HIV, and and or AIDS, uh, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, Parkinson's disease, and any condition that is equal to or greater than in severity as one of the ones I just mentioned. So you notice that I did not mention chronic pain. You notice I did not mention anxiety or depression or even insomnia. That's because those conditions would fall under the umbrella of PTSD. So if someone comes in and they have a history of anxiety and have been medicated for anxiety, or have a history of depression and have been treated for depression or insomnia, then they would fit under the PTSD umbrella. I did mention Crohn's, and this past weekend I spoke at the United Ostomy Association of America, where the majority of the people there had either a colostomy or ileostomy. And so we were talking a lot about diseases of the intestine, colon, small intestine, etc. And so in those cases, if someone comes in with ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, they would fall under the Crohn's disease umbrella. So that's how I manage and treat patients. And then as far as recommendations go, the state of Florida has a variety of products available to them. And I encourage patients to not just use one type of mode of administration, but to mix and match. And I'll explain why. In medicine, there's a thing called pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. What does that mean? How you ingest something will determine one, how quickly it works, but number two, how long it lasts in your body. So when you inhale, whether you're smoking it, you're vaping it, you're dabbing, you're using a meter dose inhaler, or even a nasal spray, sorry about my blurred, but a nasal spray, uh, you will find that you're going to get the effect within 3 to 10 minutes, but it's only going to last 2 to 4 hours. So if you do an inhalation, at the same time, you put oils under your tongue. Well, the oils take 30 to 90 minutes for them to kick in, but they'll be in your system 4 to 6 hours. Or if you eat an edible, it can take 2 to 4 hours for it to kick in, but it'll be in your system 6 to 12 hours. So now, by combining them, when the effect of one is wearing off, the effect of the other is kicking in, and now you're covered better longer. So when patients come in and say, "Well, I have insomnia and I just want to eat an edible," I laugh at them and I say, "Okay, have an edible and then sit on your ass for 2 to 4 hours and wait for it to kick in. Good luck." Now, if you ingest an edible and at the same time do a couple of hits of a pre-roll or do a couple of hits on of a vape cartridge or do a dab with a one-hit wonder, guess what? Those are going to put you to sleep, and while you're sleeping, the edible is going to keep you asleep. That's how we're going to treat your insomnia. And so it changing the people's belief because everybody thinks they know how to use cannabis. But the reality is they don't know how it works in their body because they don't even know that they have an endocannabinoid system, which means that we all produce cannabis. All vertebrates have a system that produces cannabis and works on these receptors. As we get older, or as we have dis-ease or lack of ease, we then produce less. And by producing less, we need to replenish that. And the only way to replenish that is by using it exogenously, meaning from the outside in. Whether you're vaping, whether you're smoking, whether you're ingesting, whether you're using oils, tinctures, even suppositories. Any one of those ways is going to get into your system and it's going to support whatever condition or ailment you may have.
Now, it is common knowledge that cannabis just regular cannabis, whether it's smoked or inhaled, well, smoked as well as edibles can be addictive. Is medical cannabis addictive? And if it is, how, if someone needs medical cannabis, but they get too addicted and too dependent on it, is there a way for them to not become as addictive to it?
Okay, that is a misnomer, Noah. Cannabis is not addictive. It does not work like alcohol. It does not work like cocaine. It does not work like tobacco or even coffee, where if a little is good, as you get used to it, you develop a tolerance, you need more to gain or have the same effect. According to the medical literature, it is not physiologically addictive. It is causes psychological dependence, where the person believes or thinks that they need it. But someone that uses cannabis and they stop using it, their body does not go through the same level of withdrawal as someone that uses heroin or another form of an opiate or a benzodiazepine like alprazolam, clonazepam, lorazepam, etc. So that is a misnomer. As far as whether adult use, recreational versus medical, the truth is it's all medical because most people use cannabis to self-medicate. I'm sure when you were in college, many of your classmates, schoolmates, roommates used cannabis. Not so much because they wanted to be quote unquote high. Some did. That's fine. And that's where that psychological dependence comes into play. But I would venture to say that a good percentage of them had a diagnosis that they knew they had, and they used the cannabis because they would rather use the cannabis rather than a synthetic drug. Case in point, individuals that have ADD or ADHD. They would much rather use a specific chemovar that is stimulating but helps them focus as opposed to using an amphetamine that is synthetic and man-made in a lab that has a lot more side effects and is far more addictive than the cannabis is or ever will be.
With marijuana kind of having, and especially medical cannabis being able to cure a lot of symptoms and help people a lot, why is it states have it banned and why is it so frowned upon to use marijuana for the, if it has good intentions? Why is it banned in numerous states?
Okay, well, it's not technically banned. It cannabis, medical cannabis in some way, shape, or form is legal in 40 of the 50 states, as well as Guam and Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico has a medical program, Guam has a medical and adult use program. There are 10 states that have no program whatsoever. So like Wisconsin, they have no medical or adult use program. Iowa, Idaho, um, Wyoming, these states do not have an actual law, but 40 do. So the reason is that at a federal level, it is a what's considered a Schedule One drug, and Schedule One drugs are defined as having no medicinal value and being highly addictive. However, if you do a Google search and search uh, marijuana patent USA, you will find that there is a federal patent in this country for the use of cannabis for chronically debilitating neurological conditions. So explain to me how on one side of the mouth they're saying it has no medicinal value and is highly addictive, yet on the other side of their mouth they're saying, oh, but wait, we have a federal patent on it. It all started in the mid 30s with the original drug czar, a gentleman by the name of Harry Anslinger, who had a major issue with cannabis and as a whole, and he was the one that created and made was supportive in making the movie Reefer Madness, which although it came out in 1936, In 1976, 40 years later, when I was a freshman in high school, I was made to watch that movie at an all-male Catholic high school in the Bronx, New York City. So there you have it. So that's where the issue became prominent and predominant. In the 1800s, mid 1800s specifically, cannabis was part of the pharmacopoeia in this country. And it wasn't until the mid 1900s that it was taken out of the pharmacies because everything and anything that was related to cannabis was highly and heavily taxed. And as a result of that, people just said, you know what? Fuck this. We're not messing with it. And that's where the issues began. Then fast forward to the 70s, where there was a president in the early 70s that also had a major issue with the use of cannabis and certain ethnic groups. And then fast forward 10 years later, when we had a president whose wife's motto was just say no. And then all over television, they had commercials saying, this is your brain on drugs, fear mongering when in reality, as I mentioned, we have an endocannabinoid system. But in school, we learn about the respiratory system, the vascular system, the reproductive system, all your major systems,
Mhm.
but we don't discuss the endocannabinoid system, which is intricate and intimately involved with every one of your major organ systems because you have cannabinoid receptors from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet and from your skin in. And so, that being said, it is a medicine. It's just that governments and religious entities have wanted to shit all over it and have prevented this medicine from reaching the masses, but it has victimized and villainized individuals that have used it as medicine.
Tell me a little bit more about what ketamine is and what's the difference between ketamine and cannabis.
Okay, so ketamine is an actual prescription medicine. Uh, Originally, it was in veterinary medicine. So it was, and many people will say, "Oh, that's a horse tranquilizer." Well, yeah, it was used as a horse tranquilizer, and I'm sure it still is. I'm not a vet, I can't speak to it, but I'm pretty certain it is. In the 50s, it was utilized in human medicine as an anesthetic for procedures that were short acting. When I was doing my training, we used ketamine to anesthetize patients that were having certain short procedures. And so that is how it's being utilized. In the 90s, it became a party drug and was utilized extensively at raves. And people were, when they dissociated, they said that they were going down a K-hole. And but research has been done, extensive research, and there are three reasons to use ketamine. One, we've established is anesthesia. Two, for chronic pain. So pain management doctors use ketamine to treat complex regional pain syndrome or specific types of pains that are not responding to conventional treatments. But it's also utilized in low dosages to manage and treat patients that suffer with or from treatment-resistant depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicidal ideations. And it is FDA approved. It is approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration for those three conditions. It was approved in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, and then 1 to 2 years ago, the company that manufactures this medicine called Spravato or S-ketamine. The trade name is Spravato. The generic name is S-ketamine. Uh, Approved it not only for those three conditions, but also approved it for what is called monotherapy, meaning they can use that medicine as a standalone treatment for depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicidal ideations. And so the difference between the two is One works on cannabinoid receptors, which is your cannabis, and ketamine works on NMDA receptors, or it is an NMDA inhibitor. And what happens by working on that receptor, it stimulates the formation or the increase of a neurotransmitter called glutamate, which then stimulates the formation of a protein called BDNF, which allows for the formation of new brain cells. So it has an effect called neuroplasticity, meaning it has the potential to create new brain cells, which allow then for there to be new connections or synapses, which then will support the person to be able to deal with and address and manage their depression, their PTSD, etc.
A lot of adults use medical cannabis, as you've mentioned. Can children use medical marijuana, or is it better for them to wait until they're at a certain age?
The state of Florida allows for individuals below the age of 18 to receive a medical cannabis card and receive medical cannabis. The ruling is that two physicians must sign off on that. And again, as long as the child meets the criteria to receive the cannabis, they are able to do so. The only stipulation in this state is that flower or the smokable version of cannabis is not permitted among individuals below the age of 18. However, they can vape either using a vape cartridge or vape concentrate. So they can dab, they can vape, they can use edibles in the form of cookies, brownies, gummies, chocolates. They can use topical creams, they can use patches, they can use oils under their tongue. They can use tinctures. They could use nasal sprays, a meter dose inhaler. They can utilize all these things, but again, under the direct supervision of a physician to have to agree and sign off on it, and it is controlled and regulated. So yes, children can receive it. In fact, I was the first physician in the state of Florida to recommend medical cannabis to a then 15-year-old boy that had a very aggressive cancer of his head and neck. And he was receiving 16 milligrams of morphine via a morphine pump every 4 to 6 hours to manage and treat the pain associated with his cancer. A month after we started him on the medical cannabis, we had lowered his dose from 16 milligrams to 8 milligrams. And by doing so, he was no longer incarcerated in his room, laying on his hospital bed, drooling, looking at his crotch. He was now able to be in the living room having a good time with his family, asking his mom to make him rice, beans, and meat because he was hungry, was able to be the best man at his brother's wedding and dance with his sister at his brother's wedding. So even though he did pass away in February of 2017, from November of 2016 through then, his quality of life improved to the point that those memories will forever remain in the minds of his mom, his dad, his stepdad, his brothers and sisters.
How hard is it to get a medical marijuana card?
It's not hard at all as long as you are working with a doctor that has integrity and has dignity. There are some of my colleagues that want to withhold and refrain and restrain individuals from using this plant. I am of the opinion that I believe in inclusion, not exclusion. And so I look for ways to make sure that patients are able to receive their medicine and not restrict them or withhold a life-changing, life-altering medicine like cannabis is.
Now, for people that get on cannabis for medicine, did they have to take it? Because with some patients that have depression and anxiety, they get diagnosed with it and they have to take it for the rest of their lives and some people it never really goes away. Is there a chance that people don't have to take medical marijuana in the future, or is it something that they kind of, if they need it now, they'll need it for the rest of their lifetime?
I have some patients that only use their medical cannabis when they need it. When they're having trouble with their sleeping or they know they're having troubles with with insomnia, they'll take it only at night and that's it. I have others that have seizures and they're on a regimen to maintain them free of seizure and seizure activity. So I have both ends of the spectrum, some that just use it on an as needed basis and others that are medicated regularly and they regulate themselves in that manner. So it varies, from person to person. Um, so that's pretty much the answer to that is it varies from individual to individual, condition to condition.
I know years ago, medical marijuana probably wasn't as positively introduced. Well, like people have such negative reactions about marijuana in general. Ha- Since you've started your profession as a doctor, how has the use of medical cannabis been um, different in modern days and back in maybe say the 70s and 80s?
Well, 70s and 80s, we had no medical marijuana program in the United States. The first state to have a medical marijuana law was the state of California in 1996. That was the year that my twins were born. So it's only been 29 years that we've had a medical cannabis program in this country, with the first state being California. Now, fast forward, to 2025, as I mentioned earlier, there are 40 states plus U.S. territories where it is available both either medicinally and or adult use, aka recreationally. So things have certainly evolved. I can tell you with certainty that when I first started recommending cannabis in August of 2016 to present, I have physicians now referring patients to me for medical cannabis, whereas, you know, 9 years ago, I had one or two refer to me, and that's because they were friends of mine. They were personal friends of mine that we went out and, danced. We went out to dinner together. I danced with their wives and girlfriends, etc. So like we are friends. And because of that, because they knew me and knew of me, they felt comfortable enough to refer their patients to me. Now I'm getting more referrals from, ophthalmologists to treat and manage their patients that have glaucoma, or pain management patients that have patients that are on very high doses of opiates, and both the providers and the patients no longer want the patients to be on those high levels of opiates, or cancer specialists that will send their patients over to me to address the symptoms related to chemotherapy or radiation therapy. So things have changed in that regard, that I'm getting referrals, whereas before I was a heretic. It's like, oh no, you're just doing it for the money. You just want to get rich. Well, no one gets rich from writing medical cannabis recommendations. I mean, so that's the reality.
You're talking about a lot about how the states have uses of medical marijuana. Do you have an idea about if if it's more acceptable internationally, and have you had any international referrals brought to your attention?
Oh, yes. Um, as you mentioned earlier in my intro, I've been all over the world speaking and teaching on cannabis in not so friendly countries such as Malaysia and Fiji, where it is highly illegal. Um, and the general climate is such that it's divided. Some people want it and are in favor of it and want it included in their toolbox to treat their citizens. On the flip side of that, you have individuals that absolutely do not want any cannabis and do not want anybody to be using it in their countries. So similar, the same belief and system that exists in this country exists in multiple countries. So it's an uphill battle, and even within this country, you have pockets of politicians that are in favor and pockets of politicians that are against, physicians that are in favor, physicians that are against. So it's pretty much the same across the board.
Um, you've gone and talked on multiple national and local media outlets, and you kind of explained it a little bit there, but what has the general public's opinion been about medical marijuana when you've gone on these major platforms and you've talked about the uses of it? What's been the general feedback that you've received from news outlets, from critics, and just from the general public?
Critics are always going to criticize, but I've been fortunate enough that when I've presented, a lot of those skeptics and or critics have seen the light. Like they're like, okay, there is some potential here. There is something favorable here. Some are still against it, and that reminds me of a quote that one of my first bosses taught me, Dr. Russ Pafko, who's now retired in Fort Myers with his lovely wife Adina, and he had one of his Russ-isms was convince a man against his will, he's of the same opinion still. And so, even though I'm educating, even though I'm an advocate and I advocate for the use of cannabis, I am always very respectful and mindful of my audience. And so some people will see that and accept it and be respectful and will consider to evaluate it a little bit further. Others are just going to say that's bullshit, you're full of shit, and no, absolutely not. So I see both sides of the coin, and regardless, it doesn't matter because my message is the same, whether I'm here Southeast Asia, Central America, South America, it doesn't matter.
You've also wrote multiple articles for medical journals. How well have they been perceived from your fellow physicians and as well as this medical physicians around the country?
Well, these were both national and international, and it's interesting in that, and very interesting in that when I did the the presentations or I did, submitted the papers, the first paper I submitted for approval, the individual that reviewed the paper, and it was the topic was about a um at that time she was 45-year-old female that was taking 42 to 58 pills per day and had between I would say 10 to 15 different types of diagnoses. And so she was taking all these medicines for all of her different conditions, all of her different diagnoses. And the the first journal that I submitted, the one of the peer-reviewed physicians replied that in essence called me a liar and said that there was no way that one person could have so many conditions at the same time, and it was even more impossible for them to have been taking that many medications in one day. And granted, this physician was outside of the United States where they practice medicine a little differently. And uh, and so I chuckled, and so I asked permission of the patient to submit her medical records. She gave me permission. I resubmitted everything with her medical records. And when they read and reviewed her medical records, that same individual came back with a check saying approved, check mark saying approved, because it was all well documented from all of her medical records from when she was a teenager to the age of 45. So for 30 years, she'd been progressively treated with a vast number of medicines, and there was a list of medicines that she had used that did not work for her, and a list of medications that she was using, some of which worked, some of which worked okay, some of which did not work, but she was dependent on those medicines. She was addicted to a lot of those medications. And within 3 months, we were able to get her down to just three medications. And the last time I saw her was around the time of COVID. And at that time, she was not on any conventional medicines. She was just utilizing her medical cannabis.
Of the seven books that you've wrote, the one that has kind of included been the bestseller, The Hope and Healing, The Case for Cannabis. What what do you want people to take away when they read this book, and what's your main objective that you want people to know about Hope and Healing, The Case for Cannabis?
What I sign on every book, when I do book signings, my hashtag that cannabis is medicine, and have people understand and appreciate that it is a medicine and it does have medicinal value. It is not, as people have said, a gateway drug to higher, stronger drugs. It is a gateway drug to get freedom from those addictive medicines that they've been on, or a gateway or an exit rather than an entrance drug, an exit medicine from all of the medicines that they've been on that have far greater side effects than their actual diseases or conditions.
With technology kind of coming into play, and especially a lot of things are being taken over from AI stuff. Where do you see AI playing a factor in medical cannabis, or do you think AI is going to be a kind of a leading factor in cannabis at all?
Well, AI is going to be a leading factor in many things. I use it on a daily basis. Um, in general, um, you know, many of the emails that I reply to, my AI generated, program reviews, prepares my daily schedule, my work schedule, my personal schedule, creates and replies to my emails. Granted, I have to hit the send button, but it cuts, it makes me more productive. It makes me a lot more productive and more on point. Uh, but it also frees me up and allows me to either do more productive things or allows me the freedom to go golfing more or play pickleball or go on more date nights, etc. So it allows me that freedom and flexibility where I don't have to be on all the time. As far as AI goes, I see that more in the dispensary side of things, in the growing side of things, where all legal state programs must be followed. The cannabis has to be followed from seed to sale. So from the moment it hits the ground to the moment it is out the door, it has to be monitored. Well, I can certainly see how artificial intelligence can monitor, track all of these moving parts far better than any human can. And so in that regard, it's great. As a physician, I can certainly see it being helpful in individuals that, for example, have not found a specific chemovar, or as most people call them, strains, or an actual terpene that would be of benefit for their specific condition. I have a colleague and friend in California. His name is, I don't know if he's related to you, but he created a company called Endocana where they do genetic testing. And what they do is they do a swab and determine, based on your genetics, how you metabolize cannabis. I've used that same technology for conventional medicines. I've had patients when I was the medical director at a behavioral mental health clinic where I was managing their care, and they would come in and say, I've been on these medicines, I've been on all of this before, or I'm on all these medicines and I'm still depressed, I'm still anxious, I'm still agitated. And we do the genetic testing on them and we determine that there are certain medicines based on how they metabolize things that they cannot metabolize and are of no value to them. And so move away from those that don't work for them. We go with the ones that do work for them, and the changes have been extremely beneficial to the patient. So in that sense, it's of benefit to use the that technology, whether it's genetic testing, and it's utilizing artificial intelligence, where you see what medicines their body does not metabolize, what medicines their body does metabolize, and then plugging that into a platform that you prompt it by saying, okay, this person has been on all these medicines, none of them beneficial. These are genetic traits that showed up on this genetic test. And these are the medicines that came back that are of benefit to the patient. What do you recommend would be a good treatment regimen for this person? And I could certainly see how AI would be instrumental in creating a treatment plan for the person, but medicine is more than science. Medicine is an art, a science, and a philosophy. And so the art of medicine is taking that artificial intelligence, implementing it, and then following up with the patient and saying, okay, how are you doing? How are you improving? How has this been of benefit? And then increasing, decreasing, tweaking, and making it more manageable for the individual.
Where do you see medical cannabis in 10 years' time? Do you see it continuously evolving, or do you think it's evolved enough to where um, there's no room for it to grow?
Oh no, there's plenty of room for it to grow. Rem- Um, he- Here's an example. In the state of Florida, there are 22 million people. There are barely a million medical cannabis patients in this state. There are 55,000 licensed physicians in this state. There are only 2,500 of us that are certified to recommend medical cannabis. So there's plenty of room to grow. In 10 years, I would like to believe and see that the cannabis is going to be legal at a federal level. And so now the idea that exists now that it is illegal federally, but legal at certain states, within 10 years, I would like for it to be legal in all 50 states, all U.S. territories, and utilized correctly and appropriately, and that medical schools embrace this as another medicine and educate physicians on how to use it. Because right now, less than 10% of medical schools in the United States, and I would venture to say the world, teach physicians about the endocannabinoid system. Forget about dosing and treating with cannabis, just the basics of the endocannabinoid system, less than 10% do that. And so there's much room to grow, much to learn, much to evolve.
For doctors that want to kind of teach the same thing to future clients and guests, but they don't really have the support. Their fellow physicians are saying that it's a bad idea to go down this route. It's a bad idea to go down maybe dealing with with this topic. What advice do you have for them on how they can appropriately um, do it well if they don't have good support system?
Buy my book, number one. Number two, reach out to me on my website, josephrosadomd.com. Um, there's a number in the upper right-hand corner where they can either call me or text me. They can either send me an email or they can send me an email, reach out to me, uh, and we'll have a conversation. And I would be willing and able to coach them.
I think it's an important thing because a lot of people, and as you heard earlier, as we were talking earlier about the state of Alabama, it's technically illegal here. They've been in talks, and I see on the news all the time, our local news talks about medical marijuana, but I don't know if it's technically legal here. But I always hear people all the time getting arrested for cannabis and drug use and marijuana, and so it's just not accepted here. And I've always been under the thing that there's nothing good come from it. And even school teaches that to us as well,
Mhm.
that it's not, you don't need to be smoking it. It's not good for you. It's considered a drug. They don't really talk about the medicinal side of it, that it does help patients. So I think that it's a good thing what you're doing. I think it's something that a lot of people would like to know. And I bet you a lot of adults probably are wanting to hear this because then it kind of would make them feel like, well, dang, I had something earlier in life that, as I'm at this age now, could have had that help. But of course, it then. So I think your awareness for the good sides of cannabis is something that I think a lot of patients would really appreciate and hear from you. You did mention your um, website and your book as well. Is there where all is your book available for them? As also as well as feel free to drop your socials as well so people can continue following you.
Sure, absolutely. So, and thank you. I appreciate that acknowledgement. Um, Last I heard, the state of Alabama, the citizens in the state of Alabama had voted for the decriminalization of cannabis for medicinal purposes. Um, but, you know, being north of the Mason-Dixon line, things move a little differently in the South. So
Hmm.
time will tell. You're a victim of that, you know. But it is what it is. As far as my books, they are available on Amazon. So you can go to Amazon.com in the search bar, put my name, Joseph Rosado, and then put medical cannabis or medical cannabis, and all of the books that I've published, which are seven, will appear there. Um, and then as far as my platforms on social media, uh, my Facebook is my name, Joseph Joe Rosado. On LinkedIn, same thing, Joseph Rosado, MD. Uh, on Instagram, Dr. Joseph Rosado. So, but if you could just go to my website, josephrosadomd.com, on the bottom, just click on any one of the logos for the different social media platforms, and they will connect you directly to my pages at each one of those platforms.
Well, Joseph, I appreciate you so much. And as I, as you and me talked about, my old ex-roommate used to do it, and all of his friends did it. I was probably the only one that didn't do weed. I'm probably the only person in the South that went to Auburn that didn't smoke anything, whether it was vape. But I've watched them smoke it before, and I thought, I'm just watching a crime. I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, I am watching a crime being committed right here in our living room right now. And the process that I've seen of them trying to roll it up was a huge. I've not told this story, but I'll tell it real quick. My ex-roommate that I had, he smoked marijuana at some times, and also had edibles that were, as you had mentioned earlier, can come in cookie form, chocolates, gummies. He had gummies and chocolate one time, and I wanted to eat something, and I think there was something in there, and I didn't know what it was, and so I didn't eat it because I didn't know what it was, and then later on, I said, "Well, there was chocolate in here, and I think I was going to eat it." And he said, "Oh, there was weed in it." I said, "Good thing I did not eat it." I said, "Good thing." Um, but yeah, I remember his friends had come over, and they were just rolling this stuff, the weed up in like this little thing. I mean, grinded it, and then we're stuffing it down
Uh-huh.
and something. It took them 20 or 30 minutes, and I'm not kidding you. I thought this is the longest sequence I've ever seen. I thought I could have gone to the store, gotten something to eat, and been back before y'all would have been done. This is taking y'all so long. And he acted like a nut when he was high. It was funny. It was so funny. There was like multiple stories I could tell about him when he was on high on cannabis, and it was, it was so funny. But I appreciate you so much for coming on and showing the good signs of medical cannabis. I think a lot of patients that have um, something that they hear this episode and maybe hopefully that they can go to their doctor and recommend medical marijuana as a way for them to get help with their diagnosis of whatever they're going through. Um, did you have any other things that you would like to share with my audience before we wrap things up?
Sure, that story is hilarious, and for that reason, the one of the ways that people can purchase flour in the state of Florida is in the form of a pre-roll, where you don't even have to roll it and spend 20 minutes doing so. You could just go and buy a single one or a pack of five or a pack of 10 and call it a day. One of the trips I've done abroad was I was invited to speak at the Rebel Salute, which is a yearly event that occurs on the on the north side of the island of Jamaica. Um, it's St. Anne's Parish, which is where Bob Marley is and his family are from. And so every year they have a reggae Rastafari event celebration in that community. And I was invited to go and participate and speak at the event in early 2024, January 24. And what I found to be both inspirational and heartfelt was that while I was sitting there getting ready to speak, there was a group that was getting ready to medicate themselves, and they had a little tray where they had their cannabis ground up, and they had the paper and everything ready. But before they began the rolling process, they prayed over it, because not only is it their medicine, it's also a religious activity for them. It's very spiritual, and so they're combining the spirituality with the healthcare need of the plant, and so they honor and respect it by praying over it. Then they rolled it or whatever, and just seeing that kind of made me realize that the cultural differences that exist between a nation, a people that view this as their religious freedom and their health, their medicine, as compared to what we've been indoctrinated with in this country, that it is a gateway drug that's going to lead people to perdition, that's going to lead people to living in the gutter and having people selling their bodies for. I've yet to see anybody sell their bodies for a pre-roll or a blunt, contrary to a couple of rocks of cocaine or a couple of bags of heroin. That's a different story. I've rarely seen it with the cannabis. So the idea and the concept that it is a gateway drug and that it leads to harder, more difficult, more addictive drugs is truly bullshit. Especially when I know for a fact that the first drug that people use is not an illegal drug like cannabis. It's a legal drug like alcohol.
Well, hopefully my listeners can feel free to, as well, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to him. I will put his website, his social media platforms, as well as his book in the description, and I'll make sure to put a link to it as well, so it's easy access for everyone, so that it's all in one place. But as he said, his information of his socials and book is all on his website, as well as you can search him up on Google. To catch me on social media, Instagram and TikTok is both Lethal Venom Podcast. For Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, it's Noah's Podcast. On there, I just post updates about the podcast as well as behind the scenes stuff sometimes, and as well as teasers and trailers for the upcoming episodes. So feel free to follow those if you'd like to stay updates on and be updated about when episodes are released. And as always, follow the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast from on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Pandora. I mean, it's everywhere. Just follow the podcast on there, and you'll get notified when a new episode comes out. Other than that, I appreciate you all so much for listening. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day and week, and I will see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.